Welcome into our Sunday, September 11th, 2022 edition of Bama Brigade on the Sports Flash Media Network. Typically, our Sunday shows are NFL related, but because the college football week 2 was so chaotic, we kind of decided to make the transition to do college football today, and then we're going to do an NFL show tomorrow. My name is Joe Will. I'm joined by my co-hosts Tyler and Clack. Tyler, how you doing?
Good, man. It's been a while. I'm excited.
Yeah, the three of us haven't been back in a while. I know I had to do a show on Thursday night, and it was good, but definitely miss you two. Clack, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you? It's been a great week of football today.
Oh yeah. I thought yesterday was going to be like an amazing day, but I mean it was an amazing day, but today was just as good for the NFL. So, I got my Redskins jersey on, but Commanders won today, so I'm happy. Tyler's Vikings won today, and Clack, I don't know which team you're rolling with this year. We Cowboys. I know the Saints lost. Like, are you a Falcons fan?
The Saints did not lose, Joe.
Or the Falcons lost. My bad. The Saints look like they're gonna lose.
The Falcons snatched defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, so we don't really know what team Clack's rolling with this year, but anyways, let's dive into some Alabama football. So, the good news, we did win against Texas 20-19. Bad news is that we were a 20-point favorite, and when I saw that line, it made me nervous because last year we were horrendous at covering. I didn't think it'd be this close. But I guess kind of give me you guys' raw, unfiltered thoughts about the game before we kind of dive into, the statistics and logistics of all of it. Tyler, I'll let you go.
First off, I forgot. Do we swear or not?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, it was absolute bullshit to begin with that Texas wasn't ranked. Because if you would have told me a team had the number one quarterback from 2 years ago, like a bunch of 5 stars, right? Like a top 10 recruiting class, one of the best offensive minded coaches in the nation, and like all this stuff. And we're, a noted, like historically great team, and they weren't going to be top 25. That's ridiculous. Like they should have been a ranked team already. I'm not trying to excuse like Alabama's performance. Obviously, that was the most undisciplined game Alabama's ever had. Right, exactly. Quality loss, baby. But obviously that was the most undisciplined game that Nick Saban ever had. But I'll look at it from a bright perspective, right? I'm a positive guy. I don't like when Clack complains all the time. I'll let him get to that. But
yeah, I'm sure we'll get to take for him.
Yeah, Nick Saban should retire on the spot. I think that despite the fact that we had the most penalties under Nick Saban ever, we had a bunch of drops. We had pretty much everything go wrong for us that could have gone wrong. We still won, right? And sometimes that's what the great teams do. They tough it out. They play through adversity. Did we deserve to drop to number 2? Absolutely. Georgia looks like a much better team than us right now. Would I have been mad if we dropped to 3? Not really. Like, I get it. People that have Ohio State over us. But all that being said, I think that's what great teams do, right? They fight, and they fight through the adversity. And I think they'll be better for it, especially because you got 2 relatively cupcake games, knock on wood, coming up. So we're kind of right the ship.
Yeah, I agree with everything Tyler said.
Here it comes.
I agree with everything he said. There's definitely cause for concern for, the way the offensive line looked. We were, I think we had maybe 4 or 5 drives where we moved the ball really well. But, you got to remember, playing devil's advocate, it's the second game of the season. And it is a real, true road game at a very hostile environment. 105, I was looking at the attendance, and there was 105,000 there. Probably 90% Texas fans. It was loud. New team. It's going to happen. I'm not that worried about it. But at the same time, play calling was not good at times. We felt like we started off well, with Chase McClellan with that 81-yard run. And then we abandoned the run. But, I felt like play calling abandoned the run too early and didn't really play to our strength. But, it is what it is. We got the win. That's all that matters right now. And we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of this game reminded me a lot of we're losing Clock. Clock, are you here? Oh, there you are. This game reminded me a lot of last year early on when we played Florida. I think it was the third game there at Florida, and we struggled a lot in that game. We ended up winning that game. So this game reminded me a lot of that because both very tough environments to play in. Bryce Young, I think, played pretty well. I mean, statistically, he was only had one touchdown, like 200 yards, but obviously he was very clutch down the stretch. That last drive that gave us the lead, ultimately to win the game. So I was very impressed by Bryce Young. Bill O'Brien, though, I mean,
it's crazy to me. Like when he finally started letting, opening the playbook to the Heisman quarterback, the offense had more success, right? Like the last two drives, he started letting Bryce do more instead of, I feel like he was just trying to do deep shots and like bubble screens for like the entire first half. And as soon as he opened the playbook more at the end, Bryce Young made stuff happen, including that 30-yard scamper, which was incredible. I also want to get your guys' take real quick on officiating. I know there's a lot of salty people. A lot of people want to watch Alabama lose every week, which is fine. How do you guys feel about the officiating, right? First off, talk to me about the safety call / roughing the passer, which I guess a lot of fans that were against Alabama didn't realize that they literally picked up the roughing the passer flag and it wasn't called roughing the passer. But do you guys feel it should have been? Do you guys feel it should have been safety? What?
I think they were bad. Refs were bad on both sides. I mean, let's be real. I agree with what y'all said before. You can't really pin the blame on refs. They were bad on both sides. I think in my opinion, they did favor Texas a little more when you look at, the penalty yardage. And yes, we were very, very, very undisciplined yesterday. But, I think some of that's going to go on call. But there were some calls that obviously we didn't get called for with, pass interference in the end zone and stuff like that. They were bad both ways. It is what it is. It all evens out. The safety call was that, to me, the reversal was a good call. When you look back at the replay, he did get the ball off. He got the ball off. The receiver was in the area, even though he hit a Texas player. Good call. It all evens out in the end. Texas can blame themselves as much as they can. The refs, they had opportunities to stop Bama. They couldn't, and it all evens out. So, yeah.
I think they ended up making the right call with the safety, the non-safety in the end zone. Ultimately, I mean, the way they announced it, the call they made initially was horrible, but they went back and fixed it, and I think they did make the right call. Like you said, a lot of penalties on us. I think it was like 16 for over 100 yards was the final count or something along those lines. I think there were some pass interferences that could have been called on us. I also think there were those two back-to-back calls that were kind of crap calls for lack of
that first words. Down call on fourth down where he in my opinion, very clearly made it. And like they spent like a good 5 minutes reviewing the third down play, and then they spent about 20 seconds looking at the fourth down play, and we're like, nope, it stands.
Let's talk about that for a second. When you go back and look at those two plays, okay, first of all, he had 2 first downs. Let's be real. He had 2 first downs. The spots were awful. But somebody explain to me why on a 4th and 1 that basically puts the ball game away. If we put that away, we at least can take another minute or 2 off the clock, at least put a field goal on the board. Why are we lining up in shotgun? Like, to me, that is the most idiotic thing coaches do is line up in shotgun when you need a yard. Right. Goal line set, hand it to a fullback, or, heck, quarterback sneak it. Anything with shotgun.
Put in Jalen Milroe. A guy who's like 6'3", like 200 pounds of muscle. Put in Jalen Milroe.
I think that's you either line up an I formation or goal line and just push forward for a yard. It's literally a yard. You don't make that, then, so what? You at least you just got outmanned, on the line. Why do you line up in shotgun?
It goes back to, Bill O'Brien really, and his lack of creativity and just every single one of his plays being so obviously, okay, it's 3rd and 2. Everybody knows you're going to run it. You run it. They say you get it. They go back and say you didn't get it. Okay, it's 4th and 1. You've decided you're going to go for it. Everyone in the stadium knows that you're going to hand the ball off to the running back, and that's what you're going to do. And I would have been more okay with the call had they not been in shotgun. I think that was so stupid. And like you guys said, that's one of the dumbest things you can do on a short yard situation is take away the one advantage you have, which is, being a yard away from the ball and run a shotgun run. So that was stupid. I think there was a lot of other plays you could have done there. I mean, if you're going to run the ball, like Tyler said, you could bring in Jalen Milroe, and you could even bring in Milroe and use him as a decoy. What I would have run on that play is I probably would have done an RPO with Bryce, and I would have had him take it around the edge or on like a keeper. Line up under center, and you've got this young but massive offensive line, and just let Bryce, fall forward for a first.
I like the idea of an RPO, but like some kind of RPO or bubble screen. I say bubble screen, that's too far behind the line.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do a bubble screen because I hate bubble screens. But that was not.
Also, guys, I would like to mention the fact that, and it took me a game to realize this, we are without Tyler Harrell, transfer from Louisville, very fast receiver. We're without Tyler Harrell. Getting him in the lineup, will be huge for us, I think, because he's fast. But have y'all noticed, what is up with, and this is not a player deal, it's a Bill O'Brien deal, why are we not seeing a lot of Corey Brooks?
Well, the thing that kind of worried me about the game is that for 90% of the game, it seemed like just no receivers ever got open. And that worries me a little bit, right? Like Jermaine Burton, he's an unknown quality. He had a really good game against week 1 against why am I blanking? Who did we play week 1?
Utah State.
Thank you. My God, my brain is frazzled. He had a really good game against Utah State. He had 2 touchdowns. I think he had 1 catch against Texas, something like that.
Yeah, I think he had 2. He had 1 towards the end, but he was not involved much at all.
Like if we didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs, our offense would have been 3 and outs literally 90% of the game. Thank God for Jahmyr Gibbs. He was amazing.
I think Bill O'Brien, as an offense, we're just hoping these guys are going to get open. Whereas in the past, we've seen where we scheme these guys open, whereas it's running double crosser routes, getting creative with the play calling and scheming these guys open and not just being like, hey, we have these receivers. They're 5-star guys. They'll find a way to get open.
You.
Yeah, which is just you don't have a Jameson Williams. You don't have a John Mechie. You don't have a Waddle, Devontae. You don't have these guys that you've had in past years, which, it's not a knock on – we still have some really talented receivers, but we don't have anybody to really kind of take the top off the defense and open things up for the other receivers. So
having Harrell, though.
Yeah, no, Harrell would definitely do that, but I think they need to do a better job of scheming the guys open and not just assuming that they're going to get open on their own.
Okay, so my question is one of y'all said it a while ago, Bill O'Brien does when he needs to, when we're about to lose, we'll open up the playbook. I feel like Bill O'Brien has the mindset and the knowledge to run a great offense, but it's he just does not do it. Does Bill O'Brien have potential to be, pretty good, or is he just he just not it?
This seems. I feel like we talked about this every single week last year. The way he calls the games is how an old school NFL coach would call the games.
Right. It's like watching Mike Zimmer.
Exactly. It is exactly like watching Mike Zimmer. Zero creativity. It's a short yardage situation. They're going to hand the ball off. They're going to run it. It's so damn predictable. It's frustrating to watch. And in my opinion, if the offense is going to struggle like it did on Saturday, I would just let Bryce Young kind of call the offense. I don't think Bill Bryant's going to want to do that, but I would let him kind of call his own plays. You still have Bill Bryant call plays, but if Bryce wants to check it into something else, I would let him do that because I trust Bryce Young, Heisman winning quarterback, a hell of a lot more than I trust Bill O'Brien, NFL fossil offensive coordinator.
Yeah. And I do I relentlessly make fun of Clack every time he says Nick Saban's the problem, but I do think Nick Saban being
he did say that.
Yeah,
we're not going to get into that. But
I do think Nick Saban being an older coach, an older school coach, has a part to do with that, right? Like you could tell even the years when we had like Mac Jones and we're putting up 50 points a game, you could tell that that's not the style he wanted to run. He wanted to run the like Derrick Henry grind out games, win 10-3, like taking 40 minutes of possession.
I think.
Go ahead.
I agree, Tyler. My whole thing with Nick Saban yesterday was like, there's times when Nick Saban's got to be like, screw what Bill O'Brien's running. This is what we're running. You got to take over the offense. And sometimes when Bill O'Brien's having his boneheaded moments 97 times a game, go back to Nick Saban's style offense, which is ground and pound instead of shotgun on 4th and 1. Was my whole issue with
right.
Like Saban, like, what are you doing? Like, come on,
let me tell you. Oh, go ahead.
Do you guys think that Saban is having these conversations with Bill O'Brien, or do you think he's kind of just assuming that these issues are going to correct themselves? Because in the past, we've seen him with younger offensive coordinators like Lane Kiffin kind of get up in their business, and I feel like in some ways, because Bill O'Brien is an older guy and he's been around the game for so long, Saban might be a little bit reluctant to get in his ear and tell him what he wants.
Well, first of all, Bill O'Brien's in the booth, so he can't do that. I think, I know yesterday he was in the booth, so obviously you can't.
That goes back to another thing that bothers the crap out of me. If you're an offensive coordinator, you need to be on the field. I know that he says that he can see.
No.
He says that he can see more up in the booth.
Wes Phillips today, best offensive coordinator in the league, mind you, was up in the booth today.
I totally disagree, Jeff. When you're up in the booth, you can see the field better. You're reading what those defensive linemen are doing.
But
you're learning what they do better.
I will also argue that, like, if you have an offensive-minded head coach, it's not as bad to be up in the booth. But I do think that if you are like the true play caller, the true designator of the offense, I think being on the field is probably a good thing in my opinion.
Well, it's not working. It didn't work last year, and it's not working this year. So clearly, maybe something could change. But
we made the national championship game last year.
I know, but it sounds so bad because we're sitting here nitpicking about this. But two coordinators, both coordinators. We'll get into Pete Golding after this. A little bit less of
defense kept us in the game. That's what matters.
A little bit less of an issue with Pete Golding, but
he's good.
As good as we were last year, we went to national championship. We did see these issues with Bill O'Brien continue the whole entire season up until the national.
No, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying to say that it didn't work last year, I think is a huge hyperbole.
I was going to say, before we dive into Pete Golding and talk about the defense, I did want to bring up something that I discussed on Thursday when I did my show with Hunter, who was nice enough to step in as a guest. I personally would love to see Bryce Young. I said kind of call the plays, but to kind of take the reins, and we saw a little bit of it. We saw that huge play where he ducked and took off running, and we saw in week 1. He showed his legs. I would like to see him take off and run the ball more. You don't want him to get hurt because he's not a big quarterback. It's not like you've got Josh Allen out there, but he's the most athletic player on the field. And I think he is reluctant to use his legs. And it's because he can throw the ball, but I think.
Hold on a minute. Hold on just a minute. Hold on a cotton picking minute. Last week, he had a almost 70-yard run. Yesterday, the play of the game, the only reason we won the game
I'm telling you, Clark,
was because of a big run.
That's exactly what Joe's saying. He should run more.
He needs to run the ball more. If his first 2 reads aren't there, take off and run it. The dude's fast. He's not a big guy. He's not going to run anybody over. But, tell him to take off and run. He can slide it. So,
I agree. But I totally agree with you. I get what you're saying. But how many bad reads does he have? Bryce Young does not have that many bad reads, especially yesterday.
I'm not saying his reads are bad. I'm saying if we have an issue like yesterday where we're not scheming the receivers open and they're not getting open on their own, he needs to take off and run that in ball because he's a hell of an athlete.
I get what you're saying. Now, you go back. Sorry.
I was going to say the thing that worries me though, he is a small guy. You don't want your small quarterbacks taking hits. He needs to learn to slide. He tries to extend all of his runs, I think, just a little bit too far. if he slides maybe 3 yards, 2 yards before where he normally would go, because he likes to dive head first and like run into people, and like he tried to Euro step, and it's cute, but it's not going to be cute if he gets lit up and then has to come out of the game or something for it. Just learn to slide.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but at the same time, maybe there's a couple times when he needs to be, quicker just to step up and run with it. But he's very accurate. I mean, well, duh, he won the Heisman. He's a very accurate passer, and it's hard to compensate this year from you don't have the receivers, you don't have J-Mo, you don't have Mechie. Even Slade Bolden got open, at times last year when nobody else did. I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, like, I feel like I kind of, in my mind, feel like maybe Nick Saban has kind of cost him. I don't think Saban is like wants him to run first. We saw obviously look what happened with Tua when we did that. We don't want another situation like that.
I think Bryce is more athletic than Tua.
Right.
I mean,
I agree.
Almost more slippery, I think.
I almost think that there's a voice in the back of like somebody's told Bryce Young when he got there that we know you're an athletic quarterback. We know you can run the ball. We don't want you to run the ball, because there was one specific play where he like stepped up in the pocket and looked like he was going to run it, but instead kind of threw it. And I think he got like a first down or something, but he had like a good 10 yards in front of him. So I think there's a little bit of doubt in his head that's like, I'm not supposed to run it. And I think he needs to just throw that out the window. It's his last year and just say, hey, I'm the guy on this offense. Not be a selfish player, but he's got to know he's the best one out there on the field. So and if he sees a lane to run it, he needs to take off and run it. And like you said, he needs to learn how to slide better. But if you can teach him and work on that practice, that's an underrated part of his game. And I think it could be the difference between us, winning a national championship this year and not winning a national championship, is utilizing his athleticism.
My burning question I have, and I know the answer, and the answer is just because Bill O'Brien, but with Bryce Young being our QB1 and Jalen Milroe also like an extremely athletic quarterback being our QB2, why don't we run options? Why don't we run designed quarterback runs? Like I was watching the Florida-Kentucky game, and they both had like 3 designed quarterback runs in the first 2 drives, like both teams. And it's just like they're using their quarterback's athleticism. And I think even just like options, like on 4th and 1, for example. Well, not even speed option. Like, 4th and 1, just like having a read option to hand it off or just pull it and have a keeper. He could have got 1 yard.
I guarantee you on 4th and 1, that end would have crashed and Bryce could have taken off.
Exactly. Teams pull it and then you get to scamper down and get in.
Teams aren't expecting it. We have Milroe, but it's very rare to have a quarterback like Bryce Young be running your offense. And I keep saying it, I think we're just hesitant to utilize that athleticism because last year he was so successful throwing the ball. But I don't think he's going to have that level of success throwing the ball this year with the receivers that we have. So we need to get creative and utilize his legs and his athleticism.
Well, I kind of think of something to go with your point. Go back and look. Game that comes to my mind is the kick 6 game. I hate to go back that far, but I'm going to.
Oh, yeah. So let's go back to the pain and suffering.
Yeah,
before I was a fan.
So there was a play that comes to mind when Auburn tied it was a kind of something what we talked about. They had the same situation, like a third, I think it was like a 3rd, 4th and 1, something like that. Kind of a read option where Nick Marshall, he takes off running. When he takes off running, the corner comes in. What happens when the corner comes in? You got a man wide open. So I can kind of see what you're saying. If Bryce, run an option and RPO, Bryce kind of takes off to run and, if the corner bites, you got somebody wide open. So, yeah, I can see that. I kind of agree with that if you can make something like that happen.
More than half of our playbook should be RPOs because imagine, you have Bryce running the RPO and then you've got Jahmyr Gibbs and Jace McClellan who are 2 phenomenal athletes. Like, that is going to mess the defense up. That's going to give the defense fits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's something I think we can all agree should be implemented more into this offense. I think we should move over to defense now.
I agree.
Thoughts on Pete Golding?
I think that Pete Golding, for the last 2 years even, has been a convenient scapegoat. I think that he is above average to even good at his job but he had 1 year where he was bad, and people have used that to be like, lol, Pete Golding. But defense time and time again. You look against Georgia in the national championship game. The defense did great. They gave up one long play, but that was more the fact that we didn't have any receivers and the offense couldn't score and keep up. Like you look at, pretty much you look at Ohio State again in the national championship game with the Mac Jones. They scored, what was it, like 10 points by halftime or something like that. So Pete Golding, I think, is a lot better than people give him credit for. It's just very easy to go, oh, Pete Golding, but the defense has been solid. They were super undisciplined, and I actually kind of, not to switch the topic, but I do want to pose the question to let you think about it. What was up with Will Anderson? That was one of the most undisciplined games I've seen from a single defender in a long time, and that's coming from a defender who is maybe the best player in college football.
Well, so anyway. Joe, Tyler, I think, for Pete Golding, I kind of am in the middle on him. I do think he is a lot better than people give him credit for, but I do think there's things he struggles with because, you look I don't feel like our defense struggles because of, obviously, it's not because of lack of talent. There's times we're missed assignments, leaving guys wide open, like on that play action play that got Texas.
Are you going to answer Tyler's question?
Wait. Hold on. Let me just pull something up real quick.
I'll answer Tyler's question.
No, I was literally in the middle of answering it. Let me finish.
You were talking about Pete Golding.
Josh Clackler, 11:22 a.m. Saturday. Pete Golding is ass.
First of all, we all during the games say things that are not particularly hot takes. Do I need to sit here and go back and find you?
Go find my hot takes.
Pull them up. No, pull up the group chat right now. Let's go ahead. Let's look at what.
Bro, that was January 11th. Do I need to bring up you and Tyler fighting during the national championship game in some group message? I don't remember where it was. I think it was in this one. Okay.
If you can find it, bring it up. Let's see it.
No, it was you two being doom and gloom and me going, we're literally winning. That was the whole fight. No, this
was after the game. I remember this because I was walking out of the stadium when this was going on. Anyway, back to the question on Pete Golding. Is Pete Golding as bad as people say he is? No. Is he elite? No. There's a middle ground. I feel like some of the mistakes we make are just lack of discipline. It all ties back to him. The Will Anderson lack of discipline. Will Anderson never jumps off sides. Never. And then he does it twice in one drive.
And then that unnecessary roughness was even worse, I think. He knows it's college football. Why is it's not the NFL? You shouldn't be hitting someone after they hit the ground like that.
Exactly. I think Will Anderson feels a lot of pressure. I don't think this is an excuse, but I think Anderson feels a lot of pressure this year because of all the success he had last year. He's the presumed number 1, top 3 pick come NFL draft. And so there is a lot of hype. Last year, the tail end of last year was when his hype kind of built. This year, it's in full effect. He didn't have a sack the first game, so I think kind of just frustration for him. And then this is a guy, too, who's getting double, triple teamed every single play. So I'm not worried about him. He had that sack at the end of the game that basically, gave us a chance to go out and win it. So I'm not too worried about him.
I think this kind of went under the radar because it was right at halftime. He also blocked or tipped that field goal that Texas missed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his run defense was incredible.
Yeah.
With Will Anderson out there, he's getting doubled a lot. So you're opening up his presence itself is a menace. Huge
on that last drive, too, when Texas was moving the ball, he got held so bad. I don't know if you guys saw that, but
not surprised.
Not necessarily an excuse, but I would be glad to not have to have Big 12 refs, knock on wood the rest of the year, maybe up until I know they like to sprinkle the different refs from different conferences in for the playoffs, but it was not good. Kind of answering the other question about Pete Golding, I think you're right. I think Pete Golding kind of has become the scapegoat. I've fallen into that trap myself. Beginning of the game, I didn't like our defense at all. We really did clamp down. Kind of have to look at the flip side of that too, which maybe some of that was because Quinn Ewers, who was carving us up, got hurt and came out of the game, and Hudson Card was banged up. But the defense did their job; they looked good. My issue with the defense is just the secondary. and it was the same issue with the secondary last year. I'm not going to say this verbatim for how it is on here, but why the heck is Kyrie Jackson playing over Eli Ricks? Kyrie Jackson struggled last year in college football playoffs. Don't have anything against him personally, but I've just kind of seen enough from him on the field. I don't think he's very good. I know Ricks is a transfer, and I've heard that he's kind of had some trouble grasping the playbook and all that, but I would trust his 5-star, instincts and athleticism over Kyrie Jackson any day of the week.
Yeah, I think just learning the team, and I don't think it's a hot take at all, but he will be starting by the time the year's over for sure. And if he's not, then there's bigger question about either his ability or his buy into the system. That's the only other thing I could think of is maybe, Nick Saban's a big culture guy. Maybe he hasn't shown what Nick Saban's wanted to see in order to be a full-time starter. But I mean, he did get some burn against Utah State in week 1. He did play, and he played pretty well from what I remember. So, I mean, I kind of agreed, though, because I heard Eli Ricks was coming over, and I was like, okay, now we have Eli and Kool-Aid. But also, surprisingly enough, I guess he's the slot corner or whatever, but Terry and Arnold getting one of the starting spots as well was kind of interesting to me. Because I thought for sure if Kyrie, if you would have told me that Kyrie Jackson was starting, I would have been like, okay, he's CB3 playing slot or whatever. But no, Terry on Arnold, who, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he come in as a safety originally and then transition to corner?
Yes, he did. I would be much more comfortable having Kyrie in that spot that Terry and Arnold's in than the way it is now. And like you said, maybe it's just a couple weeks. I mean, he'll be starting by the end of the year, presumably.
Yeah.
But I think it's night and day the difference between him and Kyrie Jackson whenever he is able to come out there. And he played last week, didn't he?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. He played a little bit, and he got he did pretty well. But I think defensive back is probably the hardest defensive position to learn, especially coming to a new team. And my liking everything to Minnesota, but just personally from watching them, we have our first round picks not a starter yet because he's still learning the playbook. Our second round pick isn't a starter yet because he's still learning the playbook. So it's and they're both defensive backs. Defensive back just takes a little bit longer to get into.
Yeah, I agree. But how about Will Reichert? Will Reichert, when's the last time we would actually, before Will Reichert, felt confident kicking a late game field goal?
I was still extremely nervous just as an Alabama fan, but
I wanted us to score so bad, a touchdown, because I was
get the doubt out of the way.
This is going to be blocked, and then he missed, or he made the first one. They iced him, and I was like, okay. He seemed he was shaking his head, okay, you can ice me. I'm still going to make it. Okay, that's Will Reichert. That's the silver lining to the game. I think Will Reichert played very well. He had that 52-yarder that Gus Johnson thought we were going to punt it, and Will Reichert was not so fast.
Yeah. When he said, oh, Alabama comes to punt, I'm like, it's only a 50-yarder. That's within Reichert's range. I was kind of surprised that they were so definitively.
I'm not sure what I think about.
I'm not a Gus Johnson fan, which I know is an incredibly hot take for everybody. I can't stand Gus Johnson. He was wrong on multiple occasions, too.
Give me Brad and Gary over them, and I'm not a Brad and Gary fan.
Yeah, no. Somebody tweeted there, I think we take Brad and Gary for granted. And I was like, yeah, we definitely do, because listening to Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt call a Bama game was very, very painful. But yeah, Will Reichert played well. This is kind of a big overall question I had about this team from what I've seen this year and from what we saw last year. Is there a cultural issue / locker room issue? We saw the horns down crap at the end of the game that Nick Saban wasn't too fond of. We had all the Billingsley and Najee Hall stuff last year. Is Nick Saban losing a grip on this team kind of in the locker room?
You're always going to have a couple players doing stupid shit, right? So the fact that one or two players was doing horns down and he was yelling at them, I don't think means he's lost the locker room.
But it wasn't even those young players. It was Henry To'oTo'o and guys that just have been here and are not new guys to this point.
TJ Yolen got flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct for doing a throat slash at Johnny Manziel 12 years ago. No, it's just getting caught up in the moment, celebrating hard. and enjoying the win.
I just think, I mean, maybe I'm modest, but if I had barely beaten Texas when they were unranked and I was 1, I would be just grateful to walk out there with a win. I wouldn't be doing horns down and going up to fans and talking crap. Like, nobody expected Texas to even be in that game. So the fact that they almost beat your ass, I would be keeping my mouth absolutely shut. I wouldn't be saying a single word. So
you should be embarrassed about the performance, not celebrating like you just won the Super Bowl.
Well, I think Texas is a lot better than we give people credit than people give them credit for. But yeah,
I think they are. But we were favored by 20 points for a reason. I mean, that should not have been.
Hold on, I get that, but hold on. Like, this is another question I had. Like, is the Texas defense a lot better than we thought it was going to be going in?
No,
I disagree.
I mean, I think they have I'm sure they have a decent defense, but that goes back to play calling and issues that we had. We basically handed them the game on silver platter, and I mean they had 5 trips in the red zone. They only scored on 1 of them. So
their running back running out of bounds was tragic for them too, because they would have had a lot. We would have had a lot less time to score, like on that, because then they had to kick a field goal, right? And they had like 40 less seconds to run down the clock. Yeah,
and I think Texas is an okay team, but I still don't. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, now they're ranked 21. So see, that's why the game was so close, because that game had no business being that close, regardless of them being at home and all that stuff. We talked about Tyler Harrell. Is Tyler Harrell coming back?
Yes, he'll be back. Yeah, he had a week walking. He'll be back by week 3 or week 4.
Okay. JoJo Earl, obviously, sucks not to have him. But I think once we get Tyler Harrell, we'll be good to go. I also do think that we saw some good things from the young receivers that last drive.
Yeah, Kobe Prentice especially, I think has been filling in really well.
Yeah, I think the first half and for first 3 quarters that game was tough for them, but I do think that they'll kind of step up and figure out the issues they have, because none of these guys are slouches. They're all pretty highly rated recruits. I mean, stars are just stars, but I think we have seen flashes from these guys, so I'm not too worried. We talked about Jahmyr Gibbs. He had 9 receptions for 74 yards and a touchdown. And then Jace McClellan also as well, 6 carries for 97 and a touchdown. So between those 2 guys and Bryce Young, I'm not terribly worried, and I think the receivers will pick it up. We have our next 2 games are against Louisiana Monroe and Vanderbilt. So we have 2 weeks against 2 cupcake teams, both of those games at home, to kind of figure out those kinks in the offense and get right before we travel to Arkansas.
Real quick, I mean, since we're planning to do a 45-minute show, we just now getting done talking about Alabama, so let's run through some of the other games real quick and talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the fact that the Sun Belt won the day yesterday. It made, I believe it was $4.1 million to go in and beat 3 Power 5 teams. How about that?
I like that was it the App State official account or was it the App State Barstool account tweeted thanks for the 1.5 mil Texas A&M.
Oh,
okay.
It would have been savage if it was the actual
right
team.
if it was the actual.
How if you're Jimbo Fisher, you go in, talk all that smack, and now look what you lose to a non-Power 5 team at home.
Poor Jumbo.
I'm also kind of glad that Marshall beat Notre Dame. One, because I've been saying it, I've been screaming it to everyone that'll listen. One of the least hot takes that I will die for is that Notre Dame has been the most overrated team in college football for the last 5 years. And
100%.
I'm glad they lost. On the one hand, because they're no longer ranked. The bad men are gone. They're no longer ranked. They're finally out of the AP top 25. And because they just don't deserve it. They're 0-2, lost to an unranked team. Actually, fun fact, Marshall is the first one out right now. They were 3 votes away from being 25. But Oregon snuck in above them. But I'm also kind of glad just because I saw a lot of salty Ohio State fans going oh, Alabama barely beats Texas and gets no criticism, and Ohio State beat a top 5 team by 11, and we're getting people saying we didn't look that good, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, that top 5 team is now unranked, so not looking as good. I know they were top 5 as they beat, like when you beat them, but that was preseason top 5. Week 3, week 4 is when you start to see the real colors of everyone. Like,
I mean, yeah. Also Marshall's coach is a former Saban assistant, so you'll love to see that.
Yeah,
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Notre Dame really had never had any business being ranked as high as they did. If they had even a sliver of decency on offense, they probably could have beaten Ohio State a couple weeks ago, but they just didn't at all, and Ohio State ended up pulling away. And then we saw this week, Marshall beating them 26-21. The most interesting thing for me when I look at this is that I think all, if not most, of these upsets came at home. Like App State beat A&M. A&M was playing at home. Marshall beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame was playing at home. So it's not like they're going into the other team's hostile environment and losing. Like, these are home games if you're A&M, if you're Notre Dame, that you should be winning. Like, Nebraska's on here. They lost to Georgia Southern. Like, these are games that you are paying these teams to come in and play, and they're kicking your butt and then collecting a paycheck. Like, it's crazy. I know, too, for the A&M game, Haynes King, their quarterback, has struggled a lot the first 2 games. He's 3 touchdowns and 2 picks in 2 games. And they have a backup to Max Johnson, who's had plenty of success for them in the past. And it kind of makes me think, like, if Haynes King continues to struggle, are they going to be willing to go back to Max Johnson, or are they just riding it out with Haynes King this year?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's, on the one hand, it's a young guy, and he's supposed to be like a top quarterback, right? He's supposed to have a lot of potential. So on the one hand, you want to let him figure out what's wrong, but on the other hand, when it's going to cost you your season, like it might have already happened, because like the sad truth about college football right now is one loss, especially when you were like number 6, pretty much dooms your season as far as like national championship aspirations. Like, they're 24 now. It's a very, very hard uphill battle for them now.
And what are we talking about now?
Texas A&M. But like, I don't know, because at this point, I think they would be better served to let Haynes King try to figure it out, because they already lost to App State and already pretty much have no shot at being a national championship contending team, which is kind of crazy because, Jimbo's had consistently these top 5 recruiting classes, and he seems to have all the talent in the world, but it seems that he can never just pull it together put it on, like, do a good product in the field.
Yep. So agree.
And speaking of which, actually, I want to talk about Scott Frost being fired from Nebraska. Badman is finally gone for Nebraska fans. Like, fun fact, I was born in Nebraska, so when I was a little kid, I used to say I was a Nebraska fan, even though I never watched college football a day in my life. I just like the Cornhuskers. I was convinced that Nebraska was the top corn state in the United States.
It's corn, a big lump with knobs. It has the taste.
But it's number 3, actually. Iowa's number 1. Illinois is number 2. That's your corn fact of the day with Tyler. That's your corn fact of the day with Tyler. And I'm kind of surprised that Scott Frost struggled so hard, because he was like legitimately good at UCF. Do you think it's just like the talent jump? He was good against low, like worse talent when he had a better team, but now that the playing field's even, he's kind of getting exposed, or what?
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Who else do we have on here? We got like another minute or so. Let's just talk about Florida-Kentucky game. We'll close out with that.
Kentucky's going to be a contender in the East. I think the East comes down to 3 teams: Kentucky, Kentucky, Georgia, Tennessee.
I was surprised because, that's a home game for Florida. They're favored by 5.5 points. Anthony Richardson had 2 interceptions late in the game that ended up being the difference. Because I was one of those people that was kind of banging the table for Florida after they beat Utah, saying, this is a team that can make a lot of noise. They lost to a good Kentucky team. I think they'll figure it out. And I think both of these teams were very solid. I feel like they usually don't play this early in the year, which is kind of something that caught me off guard. I feel like usually they play in like October or so. So I don't know why that was scheduling. But yeah, SEC I think as a whole is going to be a lot stronger this year. Obviously, you've got like your Vanderbilts, and some of these other teams that are going to just suck every year. But I do think the SEC is a deeper conference this year.
Yeah. Let me throw this out there too, real quick, because I was talking to someone. I know we got to go in a second, but I was talking to someone earlier, and they were talking about Clemson, right? How Clemson always is overrated a little bit, and then because they have one of the easiest conferences schedules and just kind of steamroll through everyone. I like you look at the second best team in the ACC, right? Some people say it's NC State. I've Pitt has an argument. I was going to say it's Pitt. I mean, they lost this week, which is going to be my point. Just the second or third best ACC team just lost to like the sixth or seventh best SEC team, right? And so that just kind of shows like Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky even play like much harder opponents on the regular, like routinely face teams better than the best team Clemson will play all year. And so I think it's kind of what you're saying with the SEC being super deep.
ACC is weak. I think, I said it yesterday. I honestly do believe this is as hot a take of it as it is. So give me the Sun Belt over the ACC or Big Ten any day right now.
Big Ten.
Because, the Big Ten does not. The Big Ten has Ohio State.
That's
who else? There's Michigan State. I don't think Michigan's that good.
Michigan?
I don't think Michigan's that good. I think they can't even figure out who their quarterback is.
Okay, Michigan just put up like 55 on a Sun Belt level team.
Hawaii is whack, I believe. But Sun Belt's at least better than the Pac-12. You got to give them that. USC. That's the only USC loses. The Pac-12 is done.
Hey, Wazoo's 2-0.
Okay.
Washington is there.
Okay.
We won't get into that. We'll leave that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Thank you all for listening, those who tuned in. Tomorrow the plan is we'll be back to do our NFL show. So if you're tired of us this week already, I'm sorry, but we'll be talking NFL tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central Time. Once again, thank everybody for listening. Tyler's
I believe in Kevin O'Connell's supremacy.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah.
Everybody have a good night.
Next week.